I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com. To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com. Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, with my co-host, Sam Stone. Today, our first guest is Congressman Dusty Johnson from the great state of South Dakota. Dusty's one of our favorite members, and he is also now running for governor in South Dakota with a primary on June 2nd. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, in the news, as all things Trump world every day, he dominates when you wake up in the morning. He's in China. They're talking about a lot of things. Of course, China hits on Taiwan, which is all the national press wants to focus about. But, you know, we got political prisoners. We have rare earth minerals, things of that nature. You are on the select committee on China. What do you hope is achieved at this summit?
I think we want some progress on an understanding of what the long-term trade relationship between the two countries really should be. Mm-hmm. You know, in the first term the president cut, at the time it was a pretty highly regarded deal with China, and yet China didn't really make good on hardly any of those commitments. I mean, they did. There were a number of really important structural reforms they made. Those aren't sexy. Those don't get a lot of attention. But those were helpful. If I'm being honest, I don't think the Biden administration did a very good job of executing that agreement and holding the Chinese feet to the fire. But I do think we need some predictability around what do these two great power relationships look like. And there are some areas where we need to de-risk, but we're going to be better positioned to de-risk if we know what is the nature of how many soybeans is China going to buy? And I do think Donald Trump understands the nature of China threat and the nature of the China opportunity. I mean, he not unlike Nixon going to China, I think could make a big geopolitical gain here if he can stick the landing.
How many days are they supposed to be there, by the way?
Well, I don't even remember. You know, of course, they're off calendar from us, right? So 3, I think, is the answer. Okay. That's my recollection.
There's an article we have talked about quite a bit on this show about rare earth minerals. And, you know, Semaphore has a great piece on this today and says that the Trump administration is keenly aware of the rare earth's Achilles heel, and that Gracelyn Bascaran of Center for Strategic International Studies said Trump's pushing the boldest domestic industrial policy in modern history. I don't think people realize how behind we were on this rare earth mineral game.
And still are.
And still are. What would you tell our audience? What has happened? Why are we so behind? And why is it important that we get a hold of it?
We're so far behind because it's almost impossible to do big projects in this country anymore. We've talked about siting and permitting on y'all's show before, but nowhere is it felt more acutely and more dangerously than in rare earth minerals. I mean, rare earth minerals are not rare at all.
Right.
They're almost everywhere. They're just in very low quantities. And so you need big mining operations to be able to get a critical mass of these critical minerals. And we don't like to site mines in this country anymore. We make it really hard to build highways. We make it really hard to build transmission lines. And boy, oh boy, do we make it really hard to build mines. And as a result, we've fallen further and further behind. China, of course, has turned the knob too far the other way. I mean, they just don't care at all about protecting land use, property rights, or the environment. There is a Goldilocks spot there. We have an almost uniquely American problem in getting big projects done. And if we don't address that, and soon, it is going to really complicate the next century being an American century.
Congressman, one of the difficulties, I think, in the public argument here is it's hard to quantify how much worse China is environmentally when they do a mine or they do build a power plant or whatever. I keep thinking if there was a way to do that, it would open a lot of people's eyes because they talk about one world, one planet, but they don't act like that in the environmental movement.
Yeah, they are an insanely bad environmental actor. I want to live in a world where what you said is true, which if we can just quantify it, we can just bring more data to bear on why America needs to be back in the building big projects business, that this will all happen. My observation is that the far populist right and the far populist left are not all that vulnerable to data-driven arguments.
You're correct, sir.
That's a good way to put it.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah, and so saying, in 2032, the price of this type of battery technology will be 17% less, and that will add more affordability to the average American household. I don't know. That just sounds like the adults in a Peanuts cartoon.
Well, I admit I'm a nerd, so that sounds great to me.
And by the way, President Trump is exactly right on this issue. I mean, and of course, he does have a special amount of currency with the American far right. I think he knows how to talk populist to them. And I think he is uniquely almost able to get heads nodding when he talks about why America can't get shut out of the critical minerals game. And so he's a singularly powerful political figure. That doesn't mean he's perfect. Obviously, he's not. But I do think he gives us a chance to try to bring aboard some of the American populist right that otherwise is not all that interested in large projects.
Well, I think what's interesting about President Trump, and we've discussed this a lot on the show, while he's not perfect, he is doing something I've not seen a president do in a while. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. He seems to be focusing on things that will make America more secure 10, 20 years, from the Trump accounts for kids, from this critical mineral
geopolitical
geopolitical realignment. I don't think people realize, if he's successful at these things, how much secure America is going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. Am I wrong on that?
You're not wrong. I mean, I think I don't think it's that he sat down and he wrote some big treatise about what is the Trumpian worldview and how do I try to bring about an ownership society and multi-generational change. I just think at his core, instinctively, he's a builder.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very good point.
He likes new things. He likes to build big things. And it just so happens that is very in alignment with what America needs to continue American exceptionalism into the next century. And so, I mean, I think it's a really good fit for the moment.
Yeah. Well, a moment we've needed for a while. I mean, What led to our? I want to move on to a different subject here, but I want to go back to this for 1 minute regarding these critical minerals. What led to our decline here? Was it just all the regulations popping up in the 70s and 80s that we just stopped mining and building new mines? What led to this? Because it's also not only that, we had to train a new generation of rare earth engineers. You had to build processing factories.
Sue and settle in publicly funded environmental lawsuits.
Is that when it all started, Congressman?
Yeah, I do think it is litigation, and it is how well the environmental lobby has been able to weaponize NEPA. Not just NEPA, but NEPA is a pretty good poster child to start with. And so the well-intentioned environmental laws, it was that the far left really started to figure out in the 70s and perfected it by the 90s and how to use these laws to slow down projects. And they knew that time kills all deals. And investors simply can't have billions of dollars just hanging out on a project that's never going to come to fruition. And unfortunately, there are forces on the American far right that have also figured out how to weaponize these environmental regulations.
Right.
It is really, really hard to get these big projects done on the kind of timeline that the market that the market's willing to bear.
Let's switch quickly here to gas prices. So what's gas, about $4.20 a gallon right now in South Dakota for unleaded?
That's probably about right. Although, I've seen that kind of price. It's been lower than that in Sioux Falls, our largest city. But if you get in the outlying areas, that's a very typical
And
number.
Diesel's $1 more. And I imagine in South Dakota you have lots of diesel trucks, and there's lots of distances to drive in South Dakota, right? What do you think Congress should be doing to help reduce the gas prices right now as we have the Iran war going on, various things going on around the world? What can you do to help the consumer lower these gas prices?
I would like us to further American energy dominance by de-risking a little bit more, insulating us a little bit more from the Middle East. Clearly there's like a global clearing price for oil products. No country can completely wall themselves off from those market forces, and yet relying more on domestic energy, including ethanol, biofuels, I think has an important role to play. Yesterday, on a strong bipartisan vote, the House passed out E15. That's not a mandate. That allows consumers at the pump to buy and allows gas station owners to sell E15 year-round. E15 is about 40 or 50 cents a gallon cheaper than regular unleaded. That is a big deal. And again, I think means that we're able to refocus more on what's going on in South Dakota cornfields rather than Iranian oil fields.
How do we? One of the difficulties, obviously, with Trump's agenda is that it seems to jump all over the globe. We had this huge, I'm not even sure what to call Venezuela at this point. It wasn't a war. It was, a capturing of a rogue leader. We're continuing to work with them. How long before we start truly bringing their oil resources online into the world market?
Yeah, that happened very quickly. I don't have we got a lot of briefings very early after that incursion, but I'm not aware of how much has recently come online. But very quickly, like within 3 weeks, they had a fair amount of oil. And there was some idea that, this is just being sold to Americans and it's a sweetheart deal. That's all balderdash. It went onto the market. They were using the kind of standard oil brokers that move these large quantity of oil around anyway. Now, a lot of it was purchased by Americans because that made a lot more sense. The invisible hand of the market wanted to bring that South America oil to bear in North American marketplaces. They really let their infrastructure in Venezuela diminish. If we're going to up substantially that amount of oil that will come into the marketplace, it's going to need some pretty substantial investment into infrastructure.
We're with Congressman Dusty Johnson here, and he's member of Congress, and you can follow him on X at Rep. Dusty Johnson. He is also running for governor of South Dakota, which has a primary on June 2nd. The polling shows he's up double digits. Congressman, how can they follow your campaign in South Dakota?
At Dusty Johnson on most all of your platforms, not TikTok because that is just Chinese malware, but everything else at Dusty Johnson.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be back in a minute with Dusty Johnson. Thank you. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, with my co-host, Sam Stone. We're with us still, Congressman Dusty Johnson from South Dakota. He's also running for governor in South Dakota, where he is leading by double digits. And he's one of the few members of Congress that uses the word balderdash. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Yes, thank you.
Sam, go ahead.
All right, folks. Private student loan debt in the U.S. now totals $300 billion. $45 billion of that is distressed. Why refi? Refinance is distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They provide you with a custom payment based on your ability to pay. It's not a debt settlement company. Why refi works with each borrower individually, tailoring each loan to each borrower's specific situation. You will not be calling a faceless call center. Why refi can reduce your monthly payment and guarantees interest rates under 6%, ensuring affordability and financial relief, and they do not care what your credit score is. So go to YREFI, that's YREFY.com today, or give them a call at 888-YREFI-85 and tell them Chuck and Sam sent you.
Great. So, Congressman Johnson, 21% of all jobs in South Dakota are agriculture. It's nearly 130,000 jobs. As governor, what can you do to help support those jobs and the continued growth of the agricultural industry?
Well, when I talk to producers, their biggest beef are input costs. The prices, they're good on the cattle side, but they're actually not terrible on the row crop side. What's terrible is these input costs are just eating them alive. They can make money on corn at $4.27 a bushel if their input costs are manageable. That's one of the reasons I'm running. We had two of the guys I'm running against, Speaker of the House John Hanson, Governor Larry Roden. They worked together to raise the state and local sales taxes 3 different times. That is going to make the price of almost everything in South Dakota more expensive. It's amazing to me in a conservative state that they've gotten away with that.
Why? What was their reasoning for raising it 3 times?
Well, of the 3, 2 of them were ostensibly targeted toward property tax relief. Property tax, there has been a bit of a crisis in property taxes in South Dakota, but most of that increase comes about in the 3rd sales tax, where they give cities the ability to raise an extra 1 penny. That's a pretty big leap. Cities right now are only allowed 2 pennies in South Dakota, an extra 3rd penny for special projects. Listen, I think this was a big mistake, given affordability is the biggest problem facing most South Dakotans. Raising that sales tax not once, not twice, but potentially 3 times if cities opt in, that was a big miscalculation.
I just looked something up. It's interesting. So South Dakota does $32 billion annually in agriculture. Okay? Quiz for you. Guess how many countries do that much in the world?
I wouldn't have any idea, but I will guess 39.
15 to 20 countries. That is how big of a producer South Dakota is.
That's enormous.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
They need to go take that to Washington. Anyway, Sam, go ahead.
Congressman, your first job in elected office was on the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission, talking about affordability. I tend to think politicians who start out their careers on those kind of, whether it's a municipal government or that kind of board or commission, you get real focused on delivering results and not talking points. How much right now do we need to focus on bringing overall energy costs down to increase production, both for our farm sector, agriculture, every part of the economy?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it comes back to the issue we talked about, which is if you can't build anything in this country, you're simply not going to be able to have affordable utility rates. If we're going to bring rates down, we know that in the next 20 years, we're going to need a lot more electricity than we've got. China every other year adds as much electric capacity as we have in total in this country. And you cannot have prosperity and you cannot be competitive if you don't have affordable energy, period.
No.
And so we've got to figure out how to build a few more power plants in the right places and have transmission lines to get that power to where we need it. And that will help long-term keep rates affordable.
I'm curious about your position on data centers, because I know there's a lot of pushback on them, but Chuck and I have talked about this. I view this as an existential issue for the country going forward. Whoever controls the information, who has the computing power, is going to dominate the next century. It has to be us, because if it's China, we're looking at a very scary world. What
you said is near gospel. You're exactly right. And it's amazing to me that this has gotten as controversial in this country as it has. America won, and our allies won the battle for the design of Web 1.0. We won the battle for the design of Web 2.0. And as a result, those systems, those platforms are really based on American values. If we let China win the battle for AI, that is going to be incredibly bad news for those of us, who love freedom, openness, transparency, and other Western values. I mean, really, really bad news. And the idea that, well, China can just build the data centers. Really, we're going to route all of this American data through Chinese data centers and then let them give us the answers back. This is so dumb, it is hard to comprehend. That does not mean that every cornfield is the right place to put a data center. But Americans are smart enough to be able to figure out the right project in the right place with the right protections. I rolled out my plan, the Data Centers Done Right initiative, which would absolutely strike the right balance there. North Dakota, my neighbor to the north, they've been as welcoming data centers as any state in the union in the last 3 years. They have seen their electric rates go down in the last 3 years and go down more than any other state's electric rates have gone down. So, yes.
Have any other states' electric rates gone down? That's an amazing story, and you don't hear it.
It is an amazing story. And of course, it makes sense. I mean, all of this stuff, the electric infrastructure we need is expensive. It's a lot less expensive if the data center guys are paying for half of it,
right,
rather than us, the ratepayers, paying for all of it. And the fact that there are folks who just don't get that is really frustrating.
So you had an illegal immigrant in 22 they caught in South Dakota with enough Chinese fentanyl to kill 500,000 people, and he was convicted this week. How bad is the drug crisis in South Dakota, and what's your plan?
It is really bad, although I wouldn't say that it is a South Dakota problem so much as it is an American problem. We do, of course, have drug overdose deaths in South Dakota, far too many. And yet on a per capita basis, it is a little smaller than what you would see nationally if you're combining fentanyl and meth. Meth's a little bit bigger problem in South Dakota than it is in much of the rest of the country. We're thankfully lagging a little behind on fentanyl deaths and fentanyl addiction, although that is coming up pretty rapidly. What we need is number one, we need to continue to keep the southern border sealed. We've done a really good job. I've been proud to be a part of that winning team. We need better investments in drug addiction in this country. We do a relatively poor job of that, I think. But we also need to make sure we're back in law enforcement and that we have court and probation and parole systems that work. This is another problem I have with the current governor. We have the third worst recidivism rate in America in South Dakota. That wasn't true 5 years ago. It wasn't true 10 years ago. But half of South Dakotans that we let out of prison go on to commit another crime within 3 years. 50%.
That's insane. That is insane.
Yeah, that's not good at all. Well, Congressman, we always appreciate having you on the show. You got about 10 seconds left. Where do people find you? How can they follow you on the campaign?
At Dusty Johnson on all of the platforms, and it's going to be a wild and woolly next couple of weeks. And thank goodness in our system, the voters get to decide. And so if you're a South Dakotan, give Dusty Johnson a look.
Dusty Johnson, thanks a million. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back. To run a successful business, you need one thing: customers. And how do you get customers? You get them through advertising. You get them through lead generation. But what happens if the leads don't exist or they don't have valid contact information? This is a familiar story all businesses deal with. Then they call these leads who don't exist, or they're bad numbers, or they're not in their service area. Argus 101 verifies every lead before your team picks up the phone. It's a real person in your area and a neighborhood that matches your ideal customer. Your team only calls people worth calling, thus saving you money. Free trial at argus101.com. That's ARGUS101.com. Help your business expand today. Go to argus101.com. ARGUS101.com. Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. Y Refi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Y Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call Y Refi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at YREFI, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today.
All right, imagine this. You're running for president. Yes, president. What's the first thing you need? Well, besides the $1 million fundraising, you need to secure your web domain. You need your name, .vote. Easy to remember, straight to the point, and a direct link to your campaign. No, but seriously, whether you're getting out to vote or convincing people that yes, you can fix the potholes on Main Street, a .vote domain helps you stand out. It's not just a website, it's a call to action. Head over to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name, .vote, and boom, you're ready to make a lasting impact. Get started today with your .vote web address.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name, .vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Our next guest up today, Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review and the author of Rise of the New Puritans, Fighting Back Against the Progressives' War on Fun. His latest book, Blood and Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence, comes out this coming Tuesday, May 19th. You're definitely going to want to check that out. Important writing. Absolutely. Noah Rothman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Dear listeners, too, for the first 5 people who reply to our post about this book on Facebook this weekend, we'll send you a free copy of the book. So just DM us and give us your address, and we'll send it your way. Before we start talking about this great book, and thank you for sending us a copy, the New York Times is being sued by Israel, which makes me happy in many ways. Can you explain to our audience what is going on regarding the New York Times and the report that came out about the atrocities on 10/7?
Well, on the atrocities on 10/7. Well, so there was a review, a series of interviews, 430 survivors, roughly, 10,000 images, 1,800 hours of video footage that were analyzed by dozens of analysts with this nonprofit and Israeli women's group, independent NGO, which came out with this very sprawling report, and it is very difficult read. If you actually dig into the accusations that are in there, they are almost unspeakable. Literally, it's very difficult to describe the violations that occurred, save for the fact that individuals were tortured, were raped, were executed while they were being raped, had their extremities dismembered, family members were forced to perform sexual acts on one another before they were killed, etc., so forth. The gravity of the inhumanity, the pure savagery that was unleashed there was muted a little bit by the publication about 48 hours prior of not a report, but an opinion piece in the New York Times, the purpose of which was to convey to its readers that, yeah, there are some horrors that were meted out on October 7th, but the Israeli conduct since has been as horrible, if not more horrible, as brutal, as savage, as inhumane. So who are we to render any moral judgments about what's going on over there?
Well, in that piece, it clearly appeared that they had time, knowledge that this report was coming out. And Nicholas Kristof, who used to be a good journalist, has fallen down this rabbit hole. How did someone like him end up where he is now? I know that's speculation, but it's insane to watch the degradation of the left on this issue.
Yeah, it's scary. I can't delve into Mr. Kristof's psychology. What you can say that I think is fair is that there is a certain element on the left that has subordinated elementary discretion and really basic professional discipline to retail lurid claims about Israel. And by virtue of the degree to which Israel is a Jewish state, the Jewish people and the diaspora more broadly. The allegations in that 3,000-word piece are sprawling. They are many. The sourcing that they used is pretty dubious. A lot of it comes from this HR monitor Euromed, which has ties to Hamas, has been cited by Israeli justice officials for their ties to Hamas, has accused Israel of fantastical things like mass field or executions and organ harvesting, none of which have been substantiated. The victims with whom he spoke, alleged victims, many of whom are not named, some that are, have again retailed really fantastical and lurid claims about Israel in the past that have not been substantiated. One of the few named sources, alleged at one point that his extremities were literally exploding when he was in Israeli custody, again, unverified. And then there's this claim about systematic dog rape, in which prisoners are subjected to penetration by canines on command.
I thought Batya Ungar-Sargon had the best tweet on that. This is an IQ test, and a lot of you are failing.
It kind of is.
It's true.
Yeah. It's not independently verifiable. Medical journals can't back up the claim. Independent experts can't back up the claim. So you wonder what the New York Times was thinking here when it subordinated its really rigorous fact-checking operation. I've been through it. When they want to nail you down on something, when they even have the slightest suspicion that you haven't thoroughly supported a claim that you're making, they'll go at you really hard and end up tightening up pieces and making them stronger in the process, even if their claims are not as strong or as emotionally gratifying as they once were. They didn't do that in this case. And they didn't do that probably for a lot of really sordid reasons.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Among them, the fact that their audience really wants to consume the most unbelievable, the more unbelievable, the better. The claims against Israel, and the notion being that they are as capable of and guilty of the atrocities that they are supposedly seeking remedy for by attempting to extirpate Hamas from the Gaza Strip, render that whole enterprise suspect, because they really are as guilty and as sordid as any other Palestinian faction, terrorist or otherwise.
Yeah, they're just trying to justify it. It's unbelievable. They really want to whitewash 10-7. It's incredible.
Yeah,
and the difference is, I mean, even if you, I'm sorry to filibuster, but even if you want to withhold judgment about these claims, you can take heart in the fact that Israeli society, like the U.S., is a society with an open, transparent, and independent judiciary that adjudicates violations of its law. Abuse claims like these are a violation of Israeli law.
I'm sorry, Noah, I have to cut you off. We're going to break. We're coming right back with more of Noah Rothman, and we'll talk about his latest book, Blood and Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence, when Breaking Battlegrounds comes back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Continuing on now with Noah Rothman, senior writer at National Review. His latest book, Blood and Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence, comes out this Tuesday, May 19th. Follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman.
Jeremy, go ahead and cue that spot, please. This is from Seinfeld.
Jerry, just remember, It's not a lie if you believe it.
No, I feel like that is how the left views violence on their side, that when they do political violence, it's free speech. When the right does it, it's a form of violence. And they just don't seem to be honest that they have a problem. It doesn't mean there's not violence on the right. But as your book points out, there is a litany, a history of violence on the left. Why are they unable to be honest about this?
It's a good question. Why? I think it's an honest misconception on their part. I mean, you and I are bombarded regularly, and we're skeptical of it, but we're bombarded regularly with the notion that the American right is the source of domestic political violence in this country, almost prohibitively so. And we hear that all the time. We hear about it especially in the immediate aftermath of an obvious or even confirmed act of politically motivated left-wing violence. Mm-hmm. And there have been so many recently. Shootings, targeted assassinations, attacks on ICE and CBP facilities, the sustained looting and burning of American cities. All the time we hear, well, you compartmentalize that.
Well,
because it's the right that's really violent.
I want to add to that, too, that a lot of times when there is an attack, supposed attack by the right, it turns out to have been a left-wing hoax.
There's some of that as well. But that's not to say that the right does not have its own violent pathology.
Sure.
This book is very clear-eyed about that.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Sam and I have been on this, and we're conservative, but January 6th was intolerable. I don't like the people being pardoned on it. I don't know what your view, I just don't like it. Of
course.
But, let's be honest about it. And I don't think they're well-meaning. That's my problem with it. I don't think they're well-meaning. They don't want to recognize the facts. The murder in New York of the healthcare executive, the assassination attempts. I mean, they're not even honest about who killed JFK or Robert Kennedy.
Right. Well, yeah. And this the final chapter of this book is on the degree to which right-wing violence in this country manifested in forms that used to be pretty familiar to us: abortion bombings, the militia movement, the sovereign citizens movement, sort of stuff that was very prominent in the 80s and 90s. We've seen, and we still see some of that. The Gretchen Whitmer attempt, the kidnapping attempt, was much more militia-y, sovereign citizen flavored style violence. Right. What we have begun to see is a lot more left-wing style attacks from the American right, using black bloc tactics, mob violence, affinity groups, as were deployed in Charlottesville, sort of stuff that was conventionally anarchistic violent extremism, which is the FBI's term of art for captures most left-wing political violence. And it mirrors in many ways what I talk about in this book, the 125 years or so that is peppered with just about every 50 years waves of anarchistic and socialistic violence. We experienced it in the 1910s and 1920s, 1970s and 1980s, 2010s rather, and 2020s. It's not an obscure history. No. It's a suppressed history. And I describe why in this book and explain why. It's suppressed through misclassified and misapplied data sets that purport to create statistical evidence that demonstrates that the right is prohibitively violent. It is through an academic culture in which researchers face literal intimidation campaigns, as described by a document that I explore in the book. There's a excerpt from the book on National Review right now. It's published in the latest issue, in which I go into that document, in which it describes smear campaigns, social isolation campaigns, the threat of actual violence in reprisal for researchers who dig into this sort of situation, to say nothing of the fact that a lot of the people who research left-wing violent extremism themselves and create these databases are participants in these movements themselves.
Right. Yes.
And a media culture that describes left-wing political violence as a quote-unquote myth. The left has spent decades telling itself it doesn't have a violence problem. This book indicts that fantasy. The right has its own pathologies, and it's clear about that. But the institutions in this country that are designed to deter and police domestic political violence don't need to be goaded into the noble act of policing the American right. They are constantly scanning the horizon for evidence of right-wing extremism. That's good. That's noble. But we're never going to get our hands around this problem by looking at only one side of it.
We're with Noah Rothman. His latest book is Blood in Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence. You can follow Noah on X at Noah C. Rothman. For those who can't spell, it's Rothman. Noah, so you had, the pardon system is another conversation for another day, but you've had Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Obama, and Biden have either pardoned or commuted sentences of left-wing violence. What has always been their justification for that?
The justification is in a myth that is created around them. The myth typically being that the system itself is the executor of violence, and the perpetrators of rank criminality, frankly, on the left, who happen to, or sometimes just gravitate to the left post facto because that's where their supporters are, and that's the ticket out of the problems they've created for themselves. There's a pantheon of left-wing heroes and martyrs who are criminals themselves, who are guilty of violence, who have nevertheless been rehabilitated by an activist class that jumps out in front of the cause and convinces American presidents in particular, but also governors, to mitigate, commute, pardon, and to rehabilitate them in accordance with what the left-wing activist narrative is. There's a whole chapter on this. Mumia Abu-Jamal is a cop killer who the freedom of whom became a cause celeb in the 1990s. Free Mumia was as ubiquitous as Got Milk or Free Tibet. It was a phenomenon, and it was predicated on a lot of faulty notions. Like, it's very difficult to find out what actually happened to Officer Daniel Faulkner on the night he was shot, unless you look into the story of Daniel Faulkner. If you look into Mumia Abu-Jamal, it's the task of a lifetime to sift through those narratives and find the truth in them. It's very hard to find.
Well, and
the same with Assata Shakur, the same with Leonard Peltier, who Joe Biden pardoned. These people are within a pantheon of heroes on the left. They are guilty of criminal violence, and they are little more than bandits themselves. It's only after the fact that they've been branded revolutionary heroes and thus enjoy the glow of the Marxian revolution in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck, you brought up January 6th. Post January 6th, a handful of the people who were indicted in that tried to follow that path of, cause celeb, but it never caught on the right.
No.
These folks
except with Donald Trump.
Right.
Trying to catch on with him.
But by the way, he just breaks every rule. So I don't know if we can ever put him in those type of contexts for some reason. It just does, the rules don't apply.
But the difference is these folks, once they're pardoned or their sentence commuted or all this, they move into positions of real power and influence, often in the universities.
Well,
they're celebrated.
Was it Bill Ackerman, who's Obama's buddy?
Yeah.
Weatherman Group? Wasn't that the case, Noah? He just became a celebrity?
Not Ackerman.
Bill Ayers. Bill Ackerman's an investor.
Sorry.
Bill Ayers, was an unrepentant weather underground terrorist whose colleagues in that movement said he wanted to kill people. That was his objective. And he had a interview in which long ago he had fallen out of memory, but he had an unrepentant interview with the New York Times in which he defended his actions and defended the act of revolutionary violence in order to create the conditions for the ascension of the American left. That interview auspiciously came out in print in the New York Times on the morning of September 11th, 2001.
How much of the fuel for this comes from that left-wing socialist academia? Because if you look at the history in your book, it almost ties exactly when this movement began to when Marx started promulgating his theories and they became popular here.
Well, yeah, the Marxian revolutionary aspect to it is part of it. For the most part, it is radicalism qua radicalism. It's radicalism for radicalism's sake. I touch on this in a chapter on the ideational affinities for violence, which very much have a lot of roots in academia and are cultivated in academia. Jason Burke, who's the author of a book about international Marxian terrorism in the late 1970s and early 1980s abroad, outside of the United States, so our work doesn't overlap at all. But he clarifies the extent to which the international Marxist left, which was very infatuated with Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, and Foucaultism, which was sort of the revolutionary ethic that emerged from the revolutionary experience in Cuba, they gravitated as the revolution sort of fell out of favor. It just became less of a animating feature because it was just a little less sexy than some of the newer ideologies on offer in the 1970s, among them pan-Arab nationalism in the form of Ba'athist socialism, which was what the Iraqi regime under Saddam Hussein and the Assad regime in Syria endorsed. And they evolved after the Iranian Revolution into outright Islamists. The Iranian Revolution incorporated Marxian elements into it too. You see monuments to Che and Castro throughout revolutionary Iran. And the Red-Green Alliance, such as it was, that brought the Iranian Revolution into power, was very much a real thing until the Reds were purged by the Greens. But it was nevertheless an amalgam of ideologies that have very little to do with each other ideologically. Their common thread was anti-Westernism and an endorsement of murderous political violence in order to achieve their political ends. And you do see that in the Academy today. The Academy today is very infatuated with radicalism for the sake of radicalism. It's an expression of your zeal for the cause. And too often, it is not favorable to, I think that's uncharitable to say, but certainly willing to make excuses for violence that is committed in the name of their ideas, because their ideas are just that powerful, that urgent, and that acute.
We're with Noah Rothman. He's a senior writer at the National Review. He is coming out with a new book on May 19th, Blood and Progress, A Century of Left-Wing Violence. Again, if you visit our Facebook page this weekend, and our ad will be pimping this book, you can first 5 people to DM us. We'll send you a free copy. You wrote a line here, which is the last question I want to ask regarding the book. You wrote, "Until we summon the courage to respond to political violence with consistency, the cycle will continue, and violent street action will become a feature of American public life. We should expect it." I agree wholeheartedly. What should be done? What should be our consistency on political violence?
Well, the first thing is that we should abhor it universally. That sounds really easy to say. It's a lot harder to do.
Apparently, yeah.
No, those who commit violence in our names have instantly lost the ability to claim our names. Or that should be the case. If you're acting in service to my ideology and you're violent, you are no longer my ally. You are my enemy. That seems like something that should be endorsed by every rational thinking American, to say nothing of our elected leaders. And yet, to abandon one radical in the radical's eyes is to abandon the whole cause. And the radicals are in control of our politics at the primary level. The very small but dedicated bands of absolutely committed activists can reshape our politics and are busily doing so. And they are increasingly creating conditions in which it's harder and harder for responsible American political actors to condemn violence, because they just don't want to alienate people on their side who are maybe a little bit sort of favorable to expressions of zeal like that. And yeah, I'm desperately terrified of what that that phenomenon could unleash. Targeted assassinations we've already experienced. Directed riots we've already experienced. Orgiastic displays of anarchic savagery. We've seen it. And if that's the case, if that's our world, then you're going to have people make very rational conclusions about what they need to do to protect themselves and their families.
And in the last decade,
sorry, continue.
Sorry, no, in the last decade, what scares me the most is in the last decade, the Democratic Party power establishment has stopped even acknowledging this exists also.
Right.
Well, they're afraid to antagonize their base, the activist class in their base. Not all their voters, frankly. We're talking about a very narrow portion of voters. They just happen to be the loudest.
Leadership.
They're very overrepresented on social media.
Yeah, leadership is lacking. This is leadership. You have to stand up. People on the right do stand up to the violence on the right. You never see that anymore on the left.
You do, but it's rare. And you have folks like John Fetterman, who, if he were to go before his voters tomorrow, he would lose.
If he runs for president, he might have my vote. I mean, come on. The guy has been way out there and standing up for things that should be common sense to believe in. Noah Rothman, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks, again, you can follow him at Noah C. Rothman or at National Review. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on the air next week, but make sure, if you're not already, you download our podcast, go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote and get on there, because we got a lot of great content coming up this week and every week. See you next time.
Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Hello, Breaking Battlegrounds listeners. Did you know that private student loan debt in the United States totals about $300 billion? That's with a B. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed, which means people are behind on payments. YRefi, who is a proud sponsor of our show, refinances this distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They don't even care what your credit score is. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. YRefi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually to tailor a loan that meets your specific financial situation and helps you pay this loan off. So, folks, if you would like to learn more how to put your mind at ease and your budget back on track, call YRefi at 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. You can go and look into them at YRefi, YREFY.com to get more information. They will help you reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring financial relief to you as you pay off your private student loan. Jump on that website or call them today.
All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Continuing on now, we are pleased to welcome back Chuck Flint. He is the president and CEO of the Alliance for IRS Accountability. They have a fantastic new national poll out today we wanted to bring them on and talk about. So, Chuck Flint, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, Chuck, what was your biggest takeaway from the poll?
Well, first, what was the poll?
Tell us what the poll was, and tell us what your biggest takeaway from it. Something that surprised you.
We wanted to do a poll on, there are 2 big issues right now that we're really concerned about. Unrealized gains taxes that we see that are creeping up in states and also into proposals in Congress. And then also on something that we feel is probably the most inherently unfair thing in the entire structure, which is that when a taxpayer goes to court, they have the burden of proof against the IRS. And that is completely backwards. It's a guilty until proven innocent system. So we wanted to poll it, and we did. We sampled roughly 1,000 people. We had a pollster do it. It was an online poll, and they came back with numbers that, I mean, frankly, did not surprise us. But I would say the biggest number that, not really surprising, but 66% of people do not feel comfortable with the IRS appraising everything of value in their life, which is what an unrealized gains tax is ultimately going to come down to. We sort of figured on the burden of proof and other things that people are there. That's just common sense. But I don't think that Americans are really catching on to the unrealized gains tax and what that means. It's framed by progressives as a wealth tax. And so they just hear wealth tax and they're like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. But it likely will apply to them at some point. Once the IRS gets that power, that's always how it works.
Well, I'm pretty sure Americans were saying the same thing when the income tax was first passed. They're going, oh, it only applies to those wealthy people.
That's right. And look at what's happening in New York City with Mamdani, okay? He comes in, I'm going to tax the rich. What was the first thing that he did? I'm going to institute a 9.5% property tax increase that he then held over Governor Hochul's head. And then she capitulated and said, okay, well, we can't have that, so I'm going to give you a $4 billion bailout. And then he claims victory and says he balanced the budget, but he didn't balance the budget. He just got some money to close the gap on the back of the taxpayers. And it's the middle class that's going to pay for that once again. But to the point, that I'm trying to make is that these policies, they always start with the rich because they're an easy target. But then the IRS and these tax authorities, they always want more. And historically, that's just how it works. It's mission creep.
Well, there was something about this poll that was even more concerning for me. So, for example, let's go back to the unrealized gains tax. 59% of Americans say taxing unrealized gains, taxing assets that have increased in value but are not sold, is unjustified. The problem with that number is there's still 41% who think that's okay.
I think that there are 41% of people that don't really understand what it means. And that's what I'm getting at with the language. They just hear tax the rich, and that's how it's framed. So they're not concerned about the threat. But if that was something that could apply to them, they sure as heck would be concerned about it. And
to give an example, let's say a kid spent their time growing up. You're a kid on the left. You spent your time growing up collecting Pokemon cards or baseball cards or whatever it is. Those could be assessed for taxation, couldn't they?
100%.
Sure. Let's say that you are a farmer in Iowa, and your grandfather bought a piece of land for $50,000 back in the 1950s, and now that land happens to be worth $3 million. Yeah, you're going to have to pay an unrealized gains tax on that, not under particular bills that are proposed right now, but what's to say that they're not going to lower that threshold in the future? They certainly could. And what about for other businesses that do have more in the way of assets that aren't publicly traded? If you owe the IRS money, in their opinion, on the appraisal, and they're going to be the ones doing the appraising, you have to self-report in most bills. But then ultimately, if they feel you've made a mistake, they'll come in with their own appraisal methods and do what they want. Well, you don't have stock that you can just sell. You're going to have to liquidate part of your business in order to satisfy their penalty.
Yeah, let's say you're a fine art dealer, right? Part of their profit, I know because I have a good friend who does this, part of their long-term profit is they're sitting and holding things they think will appreciate over time so that whenever they go out of business, they have a big nut at the end of that they can cash in on. That goes away.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You're taking away something that someone has built, and it's very arbitrary. And once the IRS is in your life, they're always there. They're going to come back, and they're not very clear about how they assess penalties and fines. So when it comes to formulating appraisals on assets that you own, it's anybody's guess what type of a metric they're going to use to do that. I'm sure they'll say they have something, but it's just the whole thing is very uncomfortable and unsettling for those that are following it.
And people, according to your poll, don't think the IRS does a good job of customer service either.
No, they don't. 78% think that the IRS should be held to a higher standard. I think that's also a number that's not surprising, but it's also really instructive. It tells you that people, and this was taken right after, after tax day. So this is when people are typically interacting with the IRS quite a bit. That should really tell you something. They don't feel that the service that they're getting from the IRS is up to snuff.
Well, dealing with the IRS is sort of like having a significant other, and she says, "We need to talk." Right? You're immediately your stomach's already clenching, right? The day just flies by. What's going on? So, it's an interesting point. So, literally, just yesterday, one of my businesses got a tax bill from the IRS from 2019 for $11,000.
Oh my God.
We're in 2026, right?
It's just insane.
So now my CFO is digging around today to show, well, this payment was made. What are you talking about? He needs to spend time on this today. And there's really no mechanism where I can go get his time back.
That's right. It's the compliance costs or things that are difficult to measure. The time that you have to spend dealing with this. There's another person I know who's in media who went through the same thing. He's actually pretty open about it. He's mentioned it in some interviews that I've done with him. And he had to deal with the exact same thing. And you go through all this paperwork and show him, and he said it really just took a very long time. And, a lot of times you're right, and maybe they're just kind of shooting in the dark.
Well, I mean, I have business literally, this is not exaggeration. Every year we have a dozen LLCs. Every year I get one or two notes from IRS. You owe $1,100. You owe $2,100. I'm pretty much convinced it's a scam because I talk to my accountant and we just say, do we want to waste time doing this or do we just want to pay it? And most of the time, we'll pay it.
Well, for a corporation, $1,100, you're going to spend way more fighting it than it costs.
So, I mean, it's sort of a scam. It's sort of like a Ponzi scheme.
I will tell you that I've spoken in the past with a former IRS attorney who was there for a long time, and you want to talk about something that's kind of a scam or a scheme. This is not something that you can find in any type of a FOIA request if you were to FOIA the IRS, but they target elderly individuals between the ages of 70 and 80. And when they need to kind of bump their numbers up and get their quota, they will go ahead and assess elderly taxpayers a certain amount and then just look to close them out for 20% of the assessment because they know they can't really fight it. A lot of them are living on fixed incomes. And it's something that's been going on for a long time. It's difficult to quantify with any statistics that the IRS produces, but it's more cultural within the IRS. They know that that's a demographic that they can go to when they need to bump case numbers up. And it's when I heard that, it was. There's some other things that they do. This is something that would probably surprise or maybe not surprise your audience. But they conduct training audits, except the other person on the end of that audit doesn't know that it's a training audit, but it's just an audit, and it's not real. They just go ahead and it's done for training purposes. But you still have to go through all the motions, probably hire a lawyer, maybe get your CPA involved, and it costs you money.
My God, that's insane.
I've heard that from multiple sources too.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing you say about that causes me pause. Says, oh, that can't be happening, right?
Sure.
Chuck, you were chief of staff to Senator Marsha Blackburn. You're going to be Governor Blackburn here shortly.
She will.
What type of legislation, if you were running for Congress, would you push to clean up these things you pulled on?
Well, I would make sure, first of all, that you can never have an unrealized gains tax. Look, to me, when I see the unrealized gains tax and some of these wealth tax proposals that are in Congress, they want to plus up the IRS $100 billion. The IRS is the most dangerous agency in the federal government. They have the ability to audit, which I think, short of the ability to incarcerate, is the greatest tool in the government's toolbox. I would honestly... I would do something to limit the amount of time that careers can spend at the IRS. I think you should be capped because these people are embedded there for decades and they just think that they can do whatever they want, more so than other agencies because they have the authority to do it. So just off the top of my head, I would clean house. I would chop that workforce down in half. You'll probably be able to do it because of technological advances. And just get rid of these people. I mean, you've got to make it easier to fire them. And just to give you one quick example, we've got an outstanding FOIA request with the IRS, and the 2 times that I've been contacted on it over the past year on tax day. Now, that's not a coincidence. Both times to tell me that they needed an extension, they can't comply with our request, which, by the way, was a pretty narrowly tailored request. But that's what I'm getting at. There's no accountability. There needs to be a mechanism, and I'm not sure what it would be in my head right now, to a T, but I would definitely love to see the burden of proof flipped. That would be huge.
It's almost one of those things, you don't have this in federal elections, but like we do with some local jurisdictions where you have to, the voters have to go out and retain judges. I almost think you should have that to the voters to retain the head of the IRS every 4 years. Like some
agree.
mechanism. One thing I wanted to touch on before we let you go here, Chuck, a lot of countries, you hit on technology and the customer service aspect. Most countries do not make their citizens at their own risk figure out their own taxes. Most of them just send you a tax assessment or bill or accounting, and then you have the right to dispute it. Why don't we, or why haven't we moved to that system?
It's a good question, and one I haven't studied enough on to be able to give you a concrete answer. I can tell you that former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld used to write a letter to the IRS every year when he would file his taxes, and it would say, "My wife and I don't know what we owe. We're just sending this in, hoping that we're right. We've hired the best accountants that we can, and maybe we're right, but we're not really sure." That's the way the system works, and it's really a classic. He used to send that in every year, and right around tax day, it always pops up. Somebody posts it, and I really enjoy reading that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, and one other thing I'd like to mention too quick is that making the IRS pay when it goes to court and it loses, I think would also incentivize them to be more careful about the assessments that they give to people. Because if it gets challenged and they lose, then the agency owes money, and that probably gets stuck on that agent's record. And I think they would be more careful.
That seems like a big one. It also seems like the type of issue that you could get bipartisan support for.
I think so. Listen, I was a prosecutor. The burden of proof and loser pays when the government, because the government, it's not a charge, but in essence, they are charging you.
Right.
They're the ones who make the assessment. Right. So why do you have the burden of proof? That is completely backwards. I can't imagine what that would have been like as a prosecutor going into court and then looking at the defendant and saying, okay, go ahead and prove your case. That should never be the way that it is when the government is doing something to, they're not threatening your liberty the way they are when you're a prosecutor. But still, the ability to financially cripple you is something that can be life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. This stuff drives me nuts. I mean, really, Chuck and Chuck. This stuff drives me insane because it is clearly such a bureaucratic, developed system, and it almost looks from the outside like the politicians have spent 50 years just saying, well, you all are the experts, run with it. And every time anyone does that in any part of our society, that agency just goes entirely off the rails.
100%.
Well, Sam, the reason that it also drives people nuts is because that it's so common sense. Listen to what we're talking about right now. Look at our polling.
Right.
It's common sense. People get it. And it's just something that they hear and they say, wow, okay, I get that. Look, I'll give you another example, just really quick. One of the wealth tax bills belongs to Senator Warren. She calls it her ultra-millionaire tax. Well, Senator Warren is worth millions of dollars, and she talks about putting this bill forward to fix a rigged system. She's excluded from her own tax. She's an ultra-millionaire to me.
Right.
So the hypocrisy of pushing something like that forward and then excluding yourself and then saying you're fixing a system that's rigged is, I mean, that's rich.
Yeah, the Warren Sanders AOC wing of the left just kills me because it's like Bernie somehow thinks that his book wealth shouldn't be considered wealth, and she thinks that all her money shouldn't be considered wealth, and AOC just has no bloody idea what she's talking about ever. I mean, this stuff has gotten out of control. And they're going to do things that truly hamper our economy and the people of this country going forward for a long time if they move forward with these wealth taxes.
They absolutely will. And look at Bernie. He flies around on a private jet everywhere going on about oligarchs and consolidation of power.
Well, you got to get
and
to your 3 houses in an efficient amount of time. How do you do it without a private jet?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a problem I have, but
I'd like to learn how to handle that personally someday.
Yeah.
I pray that's your burden in the future.
For a career government employee like Bernie Sanders, it's amazing the wealth that some of these members accumulate. I think we all know how they're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable stuff. Chuck Flint, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, you can follow him on X at Chuck A. Flint, and also make sure you're going to IRS Accountability.org to stay in touch with all of their work, because this is important stuff. The IRS, I think, 90% of Americans would probably agree the IRS is not doing a very good job of serving the people of this country, especially when they learn all the facts. And it takes people like Chuck Flint to put that in front of them.
Maybe we need to do a poll online. Would you rather get a call from the IRS or a call from your girlfriend? We need to talk. Let's make that happen, ladies, okay?
I mean, honestly, when I had a mother-in-law that wasn't the best relationship, I would have taken that call first.
Yeah.
Chuck, have a great weekend, buddy. Look forward to having you on soon, Bo.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back.
All right, folks, as we head towards the finish line for Breaking Battlegrounds here today, we have an all-new song for our all-new feature. Bee's Corner has its own tune. We got our jingle, so let's hear it.
Yay! Murder, mystery, secrets untold. The truth gets set free when Bee gets a hold. Crimes where killers roam off free, or even ones where they get caught at the scene. From cold case files to headline news, she's breaking it all down just for you. So come take a seat, don't miss a beat. Bee's Crime Corners where the stories go deep.
All right.
That's my jingle.
Loving it.
Okay, so today we have Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. This was a case back in 2007 in Tennessee. So it started when the young couple, Channon was 21, Christopher was 23, and they were outside of their apartment going on a date, and Lamarcus DeVell Davidson and others abducted them. They jacked their car, kidnapped them, brought them back to Davidson's house, and they raped, tortured, and murdered them. They ended up finding Christopher Newsom the next day after he was brutally assaulted, raped, and shot 3 times execution style on train tracks, burned, and half naked. Yeah. They then found Channon. They didn't know that there was a female involved until like a day later.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, when they found her car. There was a lot of like different ties in this story that like kind of really pushed the investigation along, but this was also another story where there was a lot of missed steps that could have completely screwed the investigation. But then they found Shannon's vehicle outside of Davidson's house, like a couple houses down, and they found a bank envelope in the back seat with his prints on it. And they ended up getting a warrant for the house. But the warrant was not signed, but it was still executed. And multiple people missed the fact that it was not signed by the cop that was supposed to sign it. So all this evidence they ended up finding in Davidson's house, like multiple pairs of clothing from Christopher and Channon. They found Christopher's running shoes the day they got Davidson. They found that Davidson's girlfriend had a bunch of Shannon's clothes. And the cherry on top, they found her body in his trash can in 4 trash bags with his DNA found on them, suffocated with her eyes open.
Oh my
gosh. So she suffocated in his trash can after being like tortured for the last like 2 days after finding Chris in his house. And then that evidence, though, he tried to fight back in 2019 and say that that evidence couldn't be used because the warrant wasn't signed. Which technically in a court of law, they would throw it away. But they ended up granting like a good faith for it. So they let it because it was a dead body. So they had to use it.
Wow.
But then when the case like was initially going to trial and stuff for like the first couple of years, the judge that was like starting the case, he was exposed for taking painkillers. So that also led the trial later down for Davidson.
Where was this at?
This was in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, yeah. And like there's a couple of reviews online that are so crazy because these reporters that were on the case, like through and through, that needed therapy after it even. They were so like involved in it. They said that this judge, they had a couple conversations outside in the smoking area when they were going to catch a smoke, and he was like laying down like half out of it, like cigarette hanging out his lip, not even lit. Like so completely like pain killed out of it.
Oh,
and he had back issues. So then this judge was set to go on a leave. And the funny thing was the reporter said the judge came up to this reporter and was like, I'm having back issues, so don't ask any questions. Like, I'm just having back issues and I'm going on a leave. But it was because he got exposed for the drugs and they were requiring him to go to therapy.
Oh, my goodness.
Which then he was disbarred. So that ended up like causing an uproar in 2019 when Davidson tried to say like, oh, like, no, like the whole warrant isn't valid. But they were like, no, we handled this years ago. It's not valid. And then there were like 5 other suspects that were involved in the whole case as far as like Eric Boyd and the carjacking.
So did any of those suspects know the victims?
No. And that's a crazy part too, because they said with how cruel and malicious and just violent this murder was, they should have known them. And they said 9 out of 10 times with a murder like this, like they do know them.
Yeah, you really never see this level of random violence by a group of people.
So that also started accusations of, oh, this is race. Everybody was saying it was race. When one of the suspects was found in Kentucky, Kentucky's sheriff ended up making a statement that was completely false about like, oh, we found mutilated bodies and this, and based off like the rumors that were going around. So that ended up even uproaring it even more.
Chuck's giving me this look and I'm laughing because here's the thing I know about sheriffs. 95% of them, like Sheriff Mark Lamb, who's running for Congress here in Arizona, we recently had on the program, they're brilliant. They're fantastic. They're great choices. Occasionally someone gets elected into one of those offices who's freaking loony.
This guy, yep. And so then with all this uproar and false information and the time being 2007, there's still, I mean, even today, there's still big race issues, but they were saying it was that, but also that is kind of what just blew it up. But then these reporters were saying that this sheriff and all that is what caused them to start making like live tweets during the court cases, because they were like, we are sick of this false information. So that's where they really started pushing. This was one of the first cases besides in Texas where they started doing like live tweets during a court case to let people know like the information and the accurate information. So that was good. So it definitely started that.
Ow. Crazy story.
Yeah. And the saddest part is like her eyes were open. Her eyes were
open. What was the motivation? Was it just the carjacking or what was it?
Carjacking. Well, I want some money, some items.
What goes through your evil mind and heart to go take it to that extreme?
Right.
I think, look, I think this is one of the things that the left completely ignores with their anti-recidivist, anti-cop view. Is that there are horrible humans on this planet. There are evil people. Evil exists. And sometimes it exists in people, and they need to be stopped. They need to be jailed. They need to be executed.
Yeah.
It's not happening at
we really
it needs to be.
We really need to start expediting executions.
Well, so I wanted to bring up one other thing, because this came out today. We covered on the former version of this segment when it was Kylie Campbell doing it. The Alex Murdaugh case from South Carolina.
Yeah, Supreme Court's having. Is it retrial? Is it a retrial?
Yeah, so they ordered the conviction overturned based on the bias of the prosecutor. So that is going to go back to trial now.
What was the bias of the prosecutor?
This just popped up, so I haven't had a chance to read it. But the court cited improper jury influence by Colleton County Clerk Becky Hill.
Did you ever see the Netflix documentary on the Murdaugh murder?
Yeah.
I don't know how I don't know how he gets a fair trial.
Well, no, that's a great question.
I mean, how do you get a fair trial? Because there's been documentaries on it. People have talked about it. Unlike this case, everybody knows that case.
I actually think there are times, though, where there's been enough time passed. If you're going to do something like this, it probably ought to be retried in a different state.
Yeah, you almost need to move them out west.
Right. Like, you need to get it way the heck away from where that is, where people were focused on that case and heard it in the news every day for a year.
But that's one of those cases, though, unlike what B just shared with us. Boy, I'd like to do a poll of how many people have heard about that case and what he did, because it was really it's a celebrity laden, because that family is so well known.
Prominent family.
He had drugs. There's hired. Was there a hired hitman? His wife, kid. I mean, I don't know how he gets a fair trial.
This is an all over the place story. Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure he deserves really a fair trial.
Oh, I don't either. But that's really quite. And this is the Supreme Court did this, right?
Yeah. Which is a pretty dramatic thing to overturn it on that basis. I mean, that had to be some.
They had some real evidence,
right?
I mean, that they didn't willy nilly do that, especially in South Carolina.
No,
because no one's there is doing.
No, look, the South Carolina Supreme Court has no hesitation putting people in the electric chair.
Yeah, so so that evidence must have been overwhelming.
It absolutely had to be 100%.
Anyway, what was so these folks were all convicted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is it life in prison or execution?
The girl who was just like involved, the girlfriend, she only got 53 years, which she ended up getting her sentence shortened when she went through the two other judges. Eric Boyd was convicted on a federal level and sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Lamarcus Davidson, George Thomas, they had multiple prior felony convictions. So after the jury trial, Davidson was convicted and sentenced to death, lethal injection, and Cobbins and Thomas are sentenced to life in prison without parole.
They should all get lethal injection.
They all should, yes.
100%, including the girl.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. All right, folks, stay tuned. Our final segment coming up here, comedian Lou Perez. You're not going to want to miss that. Breaking Battlegrounds back in one moment. All right, welcome to the final segment of Breaking Battlegrounds for today. Our next guest up is part of a new feature. We're going to have him on a couple of times a month. Lou Perez, comedian, producer, the author of That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore on the death and rebirth of comedy. He was last on our program back in January, but you might have seen him on Goodfield, Fox News Primetime, One Nation. He's kind of been everywhere. One of the funniest guys on the planet. Lou Perez, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back. I hope I do well enough to actually be brought back.
Well, yeah, Lou was friend of the show. Now he's contributor to the show. And you can be a contributor. You have something to offer, folks.
So if a month from now you haven't heard from Lou Perez, I guess he's not funny anymore.
There we go. I dropped in my standing.
The women here in the studio are sort of now like a judgment paddle of America's Got Talent with their thumbs up and down. So Lou, you sent me a piece. A strange, well, it's not strange, it's a loophole, how a law allowed a convicted child sex offender to father a surrogate baby. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'll just give everybody a minute to fire up their wood chippers before I get into this. Yeah, it was a story in the New York Sun that I read by Holly McKay, but it was originally broken by Anna Slatz at Redux, a feminist website. And yeah, the story is Brandon Keith Riley Mitchell, a Tier 1 registered sex offender and former high school teacher. Oh, yeah, of course, why not? Of course. Who he pled guilty to felony child pornography charges and corruption of a minor, and he's now a legal parent to an infant boy. And this is a guy who sent more than 12,000 sexually explicit messages to a 16-year-old male student, and now he and his husband, Logan, perfect name, they raised some money on GoFundMe in order to bring a child into the world. And when I first read about the 12,000 sexually explicit messages, I was like, that's a lot. That's maybe
that is a lot.
Yeah, like you wonder, like maybe did he get it out of his system? After 12,000.
Well, I mean, how much time do you have to spend sending it? I mean, I was looking at our Facebook page this morning. We had almost 300,000 followers. We've posted like 30,000 things over 5 years. So 15. I mean, how long was this going on with this kid?
And I'm gonna bet that he was sending most of them. I bet the kid was I don't know what the kid was sending back, but man, that was a lot. And so I checked out the GoFundMe, which was erased, but is available if you do like kind of a Wayback Machine. And so it was basically the two husbands put this out there, or at the time, Brandon, who was the fiance to Logan, they were looking to expand their family. And they were going to be doing it through gestational surrogacy. And I didn't know much about that, but according to them, gestational surrogacy, the child is not biologically related to the surrogate mother. Instead, an embryo is created via in vitro fertilization using an anonymous donor egg. And so they put the call out there, and November 3rd, 2023, we have an update. And the two husbands, they were excited to announce that they finally have a surrogate. After 3 long years of searching, a family friend named Shayna Martinovich reached out in early 2023 to see if we were still looking. Our surrogate went through extensive medical and social worker evaluations in order to be approved for surrogacy. I want to repeat that. Okay? Remember, this is a convicted sex offender. Right? And the surrogate mother
Right.
went through extensive medical and social worker evaluations in order to be approved for surrogacy.
You know, what was interesting in this article you sent me from the New York Sun, they have a woman named Kaylee Fell, who's with the Center for Bioethics and Cultural Network, and she made the following. Adoption law was developed to protect children that had already been born or conceived, vulnerable children in need of state oversight. By contrast, surrogacy has been treated as a form of private reproductive arrangement. It has never been about child welfare, but instead about adult desires.
Yeah, that was that really hit home, especially since these guys have been described as surrogacy influencers. They first came on the scene after they were documenting the first however months of their son Atticus, of his being in the world, and they were lighting candles and eating cake and stuff like that, and putting themselves out there. And it was only after people started digging, and after Redux said who are these guys, that people found out, oh, this is insane.
Well, and Louisiana is the only state that does not allow this. If you're a child, if you're convicted,
That's the only state that
only
doesn't?
state. I actually, Lou, when you sent this to me, I copied and pasted the article and sent it to some legislators, and they're like, "Oh no, we got to stop that right away." So I mean, we may have 3 states now just stop this immediately because of what you sent out and talked about today.
Yeah, it's something that it's so bananas that you wouldn't even think there would necessarily need to be a law. Like, you think it would just be, just so obvious. And, something that I noticed on the GoFundMe, there's a comment from an Autumn. She gave $150 to the cause, and she wrote, quote, "I could not imagine a better family for a baby. Best wishes." Now, talk about a lack of imagination, that you can't think of a better family for a child to grow up in. And just think about all the people who were involved here, because you're obviously talking about the surrogate herself. All of these people, this is what's so crazy. All these people are online. Yeah. I went and looked at all their Facebook pages. The surrogate, her husband is there. The husband was actually, he was interviewed about this, and he was questioned. And he said, "I didn't know the story, and I didn't care to dig into it." And it's like, well, I mean, what does that say? I guess when money's on the line, and
it says a lot.
Your wife is basically being used as livestock. Then, hey, I don't care. I don't want to know too much.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that old Winston Churchill story where the woman asked him, I don't know if it's folklore or not, how much would you pay me £1 million to sleep with you? And then he comes back and says, would you take 10 pounds? And she goes, well, what type of woman do you think I am? He goes, we've already determined that. Now we're just negotiating the price, right? And apparently that's this woman, right?
Exactly. And on the whole issue of it being legal, I mean, that's obviously the crazy part. It is totally legal. But then there's an interesting detail here where, since the guy is a convicted sex offender, he was ordered to have no unsupervised contact with minors. Now ask yourself, how does that, what happens in this situation? How does that
work with a baby?
Well, it goes back to that definition, that woman, that great quote by that woman. They view it 2 different things.
Right.
And it needs to be prevented, or a child needs to be taken away immediately with no contact.
Yeah, and because look at the situation. This guy isn't allowed to coach his son's little league. He's not allowed to go to the school, but the kid is always going to be able to go back home to his 2 dads.
It's just incredible. Lou, before we let you go, and yes, we're going to invite you back now because that was a very good segment. Have you been doing any comedy tours lately?
Yeah, I've been doing stuff all around. I have a show in Manhattan, New York City on May 28th, Thursday. It's called Parental Advisory, and it's at a place called Some Good Wine. We mix wine tasting and stand-up comedy. So if the comedians suck at the start of the show, by the time we get to the end, they are very good.
Well, Some Good Wine sounds like a place where they give you some wine, but they may add some Sprite to it or root beer or something. So, we'll see how that goes with you on that. So, you wrote your great book. You wrote a book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, on the death and rebirth of comedy. Have you found audiences getting back to just enjoying comedy again, or do you feel people are still watching what they say?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've definitely found that. And something else, too, that I found is if there are people in the audience who are upset about the joke and they look around, for support.
Sure.
They're usually looking at people who are laughing and who are getting the joke. So we are kind of ostracizing people who, without a sense of humor, who are getting, want to be offended more than entertained. And I feel like we are pushing them out. I mean, once we can do that and get the sex offender surrogates out of the picture, I think it's going to be a happy world.
Lou Perez, you can follow Lou at X on Lou Perez, Perez. Lou, thanks a million. Look forward to having you back in a couple of weeks, buddy. We appreciate you.
Likewise. Thanks.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds, folks. We hope you've enjoyed the show this week. Well, you should. It was a great show. On behalf of Sam, Brennan, Lou Perez, Sydney, Jeremy, this cast is really growing.
It is.
And the Winston Churchill analogy, we hope you have a great weekend. You can follow us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote. Also follow us on Substack or wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, Sam wants a 5-star review, so give it to him. Have a great weekend.